achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're taking a look at the final UFC event of 2012, UFC 155, on December 29th, 2012, from the MGM Grand Garden Arena. In the main event, Junior Santos puts his title on the line against the man he took the title from, Cain Velasquez. I'll be giving predictions on this episode for all 5 main card fights, and I will also repost my Melvin Guillard-Jamie Varner prediction in this episode. It was originally part of the Ultimate Fighter finale video. It'll kick us off here, so you'll get to get a chance to hear it again. Before we get into the predictions, I'm coming off not a bad showing. I went 7-4 the Ultimate Fighter finale. Unfortunately, I was 6-2 and doing very well. And then Shane Del Rosario got knocked out in the second round, and Mike Ricci got absolutely steamrolled by Colton Smith in the main event. I finished 7-4 after picking Roy Nelson in the final fight. Really thought I would have had a better night. But I've decided that in the event UFC 155 does not go well, if you buy my bet packs and it does not work out well, if you buy UFC 155 and it does, like I said, doesn't go well, I'm going to email you the password for the first event of the new year, which happens to be a Strikeforce card. So you'll get that one for free. And obviously, you know, we'll go from there. Prizes for this event: 3 walkout wear $10 credits added to your account. You can go buy UFC Round 5 figures at that website. If you buy the bet pack, you're entered into the draw. Also, heartandglory.com will be serving up one of their fantastic MMA shirts to one of the bet pack buyers. You can buy the $10 bet pack, which encompasses everything as it always has, or you can buy the $5 bet pack, and it includes a full event ranking, confidence rankings, along with the top 5 fighters I think at least have some value, even though I didn't predict them. You can take a look at those 2 lists. I suggest buying them. I'm starting to build a little momentum, and I'm hopefully going to continue to do well with UFC 155 and finish the year very strong. As always, before we get into my predictions, thank you to all my sponsors: MMABettingOdds.com, HeartandGlory.com, Walkout Wear, CouchFighter, MMACrypt.com, the guys over the Adrenaline Training Center, FightMetric, MMAMount.com, and so on and so forth. You can check out all of those links at the website. You can also go over and check out the prediction panel. They'll be posting their predictions for UFC 155. That's a lot. So let's get into my first pick of the night, the prelim matchup between Jamie Varner and Melvin Guillard. Moving right along, we're in the UFC's lightweight division for a fight I think is going to be the best one of the whole weekend, or has the potential to be one of the best of the weekend, as Melvin, the young assassin Guillard, 47-12-3 with 1 no contest, takes on 27-1 with 2 no contests, Jamie Varner. Now, 2 veteran fighters of the sport. And you look at Jamie Varner first, he has a nice split of wins. 9 wins by knockout, 9 wins by submission, compared to Melvin Guillard, who has that big knockout total of 19, but he's only tapped 2 guys out in his career, and people take that into perspective. Continuing along that lines, Guillard has been tapped out 9 times in his career, 6 times inside the octagon, and again, that's a huge disadvantage when fighters with submission capabilities are preparing for Melvin Guillard. They know he has that glaring weakness. Now, Melvin has very good speed, excellent speed, one of the fastest guys in the division, big-time power and good footwork, but again, you look at that Fabricio Camoes fight, he was slowed significantly by the simple threat of a takedown. Looking at Jamie Varner, he has an excellent power double, NCAA Division I wrestler. He will use takedowns effectively in his fights. Going back to that first time he fought Donald Cerrone, who's a very good submission fighter, he took Cerrone down 9 times back in the first matchup in the WEC. Now, looking at Varner on the feet, he's no slouch either. He showed a lot of movement and good hands versus Joe Lauzon. He has that big right hand that's very dangerous. He does a nice job attacking the body. Heavy leg kicks and body kicks, which will really show up. He throws in some nice elbow strikes, and he fought at a high pace against Lauzon and slowed down, but also consider the fact he took that fight on late notice, so his conditioning won't be up to par. This is the first fight in the UFC he's actually fought in this recent stretch where he will have had a full training camp and prepared for this matchup, knowing who he was going to fight, barring an injury in the next week. Let's hope not. Against Edson Barbosa, he landed a nice body shot and then came over the top of the right hand and continued to work that formula and eventually hurt Barbosa and put him on the ground after, finished him after the fight going to the mat. Against Lauzon, he also hurt him several times. Now, he got clipped and got hurt, and that's something to consider with Melvin Guillard, because Guillard has so much power, he might only need one opportunity to put Varner away if he's able to label him. Now, against Lauzon, again, going back with Varner, he did take him down a couple of times, but he was concerned with the ground game, and Melvin Guillard is very familiar with that, as he got hurt by Lauzon and submitted in very quick fashion when they fought. Another thing to consider with Jamie Varner, he caught the Barboza kick for a takedown and gained top position, and that's something Melvin Guillard has to be very, very careful of, because if this fight goes to the ground, he could be in significant trouble. Looking back at Guillard's matchup with Jim Miller, he was beating Miller to the punch every time, doing very well with the striking. Unfortunately, he got way too aggressive, and it led to a takedown, and Miller was able to capitalize on the submission areas in that fight. Again, going back to the Camoy's fight as well, Fabricio had him in multiple bad positions, simply was unable to capitalize on it. It took everything Guillard had to get out of those situations, and you don't want to give guys with strong wrestling capabilities a top position. When Guillard fought Donald Cerrone, he dropped him with a counter right hand and swarmed on, which was very impressive because Cerrone's a very tough guy to stop. But the thing is with Guillard, he did get knocked out in that fight, and he's coming off his first career knockout, so you have to keep in mind how is that going to affect him. Striking defense, Melvin's a tough guy to hit, 70% striking defense, but I think the key to this matchup will be the ground game. Melvin's 69% takedown defense, which is very impressive, but look at Jamie Varner. He averages 3.66 takedowns per fight, 53% takedown defense, and I think that shows up here. Guillard, I'm not sure mentally where he's at. The Lauzon fight certainly messed with his head, and I think the Donald Cerrone one's going to as well. He's changed camps, left Greg Jackson's had not nearly as much success as he had when he was with Jackson. And I really think he's going to make a mistake here, and it's going to lead to a bad position. He has a submission weakness. I'm starting to question his chin a little bit. He's taken a lot of damage over his career, and I think there are some openings there. And I think and Jamie Varner will capitalize on them. And my prediction is Jamie Varner to defeat Melvin Guillard by submission. In our first main card prediction of the night, we're in the UFC's middleweight division. As Chris the Crippler Leben, 22-8-0, returns to action against former Strikeforce competitor 9-2-0 Derek Brunson. Leben is coming off a UFC 138 TKO defeat against Mark Munoz, while Derek Brunson's last appearance saw him go down via knockout against Jacare Souza in his final Strikeforce outing. Now, Leben's coming off a suspension, a 13-month layoff, so ring rust certainly could play a factor. He's claiming he's more focused and revitalized and ready to go. We'll see how that plays out. Now, on the other side of things, Derek Brunson taking this fight on short notice in place of Carlos Vemola, and he's also making his UFC debut, so there's a lot of factors that are taking place that are impacting these two fighters before we get into the cage. I'll consider those impacts a wash based on the fact that both guys will be dealing with these things. Brunson comes into this fight. He was 3-1 in Strikeforce overall. His career losses, as I mentioned, to Jacare Souza and Kendall Grove. He's a former NCAA Division II wrestler. His striking is his weak point. He will throw kicks, and he has some power, obviously. He's a physically strong man, but he's very loose with the striking defense, and he reacts poorly to getting hit. Against Jacare Souza, he rushed forward and leaves his chin up in the air, and Jacare blasted him and KO'd him, which was Jacare's first knockout of his career, which was impressive. But as I said, Brunson leaves his chin up on a flagpole, which is something you have to be very careful of against a guy like Chris Leben. He has solid body lock takedown, single leg, excellent top control. He showed that against Nate James, and did not a bad job against Kendall Grove. He will try and advance his position, but he has a tendency to lose control when he does that. But either way, he needs to get this fight to the ground, and there's no denying that. Looking at Chris Leben, we know what he's all about. He has the ridiculous chin and the big-time power. 12 wins by knockout over his career. Now, he has been submitted twice, both by very talented grapplers, Jake Rochelle and Jason McDonald. But he has experience fighting grappling-based fighters. He has a win over Aaron Simpson where he knocked him out. 54% takedown D, which will be a big factor in this fight. He's kind of been all over the place against Rochelle. He went 3 for 4. Rochelle went 3 for 4 in takedowns. Simpson 2 for 10. Akiyama 5 for 5, and most recently Mark Munoz went 5 for 9. Now Leben did a nice job getting up from underneath of Mark Munoz, and he actually took Munoz down a couple of times and turned the tables. Chris Leben is an underrated guard, absolutely, in that situation. He's very active. He submitted Akiyama. He will throw punches off his back. He does a nice job of wall walking and getting up. But what this fight comes down to is he needs to fight it in a phone booth, and he needs to drag Brunson into a scrap and not allow him to use his wrestling. And that's something he has to be very careful of, because in his last fight against Munoz, he was clearly wearing down from the heavy grappling aspects of that fight. But either way, I like the UFC veteran. I like Leben's power, and I'm still concerned with Brunson's chin and the way he seems to take shots and leave himself exposed to those potential situations. Leben finds his chin in this fight, so my prediction is Chris Leben to defeat Derek Brunson by knockout. Staying in the UFC middleweight division, Yushin Thunder Okami 28-7-0 battles Alan the Talent Belcher 17-5-0 in a rematch from their UFC 62 pairing. Now, Okami's coming off a TKO victory over Buddy Roberts at UFC 150. Alan Belcher's won 4 in a row, most recently stopping Husmer Paul Harris via TKO. In their first matchup, it was dictated by Okami won by decision. It was dictated by Okami's takedown skills. He went 5 for 9 overall. There was limited striking exchanges. And one thing to keep in mind with this fight is Okami, since that matchup, has improved his wrestling, training with Chael Sonnen after Chael Sonnen defeated him. Okami is a very talented grappler in his own right. He's a black belt in judo. But Alan Belcher, no slouch. He's also holding a brown belt in the same discipline. Looking at Okami first, he has a very heavy top game. He effectively strikes and then will shoot hard for a double leg. Against Nate Marquardt, he was able to ground him both against the mat and cage and really limit his movement. And I said he keeps very tight on top, and that really shuts down his opponent's ability to attack and escape from the bottom. He has a wide variety of takedown attempts. He'll shoot from the outside. He'll use a double underhook, trips, lots of variety, and that keeps his opponent guessing. Now, he needs to watch his neck against both Boetsch, Marquardt, and actually against Roberts as well. He found himself stuck in a guillotine even momentarily, and that's something with Belcher. Do not give him opportunities to set up those submissions because he will finish them. Now, on the feet, Okami is constantly working to improve his boxing. He has a very sturdy and stiff jab, decent combinations, and he effectively controls the center of the cage, which can really play in the judge's decision if this fight goes the distance. Against Boetsch, he was really hurting him with the jab and threw a nice right jab, straight left combination that continually had him backing up. Now, again, the Buddy Roberts fight, he was trying to time him with his shots as Roberts came forward and stick that jab in there and counter. He did get hit a couple of times, but at the same time, he was still doing a lot of damage because he's a very powerful man. Now, looking at Alan Belcher, what this fight comes down to for him is that he needs to keep it standing. He has trouble defending takedowns. Ed Herman took him down 5 times, Dennis Kang 3, Akiyama 3, even Patrick Cote took him down twice, and Paul Harris took him down very easily with a quick single leg in the opening minutes of that fight. He does have a 52% takedown defense, but the key to this matchup is his Muay Thai. He needs to work his kicks to define the distance, and simply put, he needs to avoid the grappling, even though he's very good on the mat in his own right. But the thing is throwing those kicks could lead to takedown opportunities. Going back to the Patrick Cote fight, and Cote's not a world-class grappler by any stretch of the imagination, but Cote was able to catch a kick and take him down. Dennis Kang was able to land a lot of combinations and then switch things up and take Belcher down in that fight. Now, in that matchup, until Belcher caught Kang with a submission, he was losing that fight, and that's something to keep in mind here. If he can't get off his back, he's going to be in trouble. Now, technically on the ground, he's very sound as BJJ black belt. He defended the sub attempts against Paul Harris very well, but looking at what Paul Harris was attempting to do, when he's attacking submissions and looking to take his, looking for leg locks, that created openings for Belcher to counter and get out. Okami's not going to do that. He's going to keep hard on top of him and pressure him down. As I said already, Belcher needs to keep this fight standing, use his striking and distance. For Okami, he'll need to use his jab and time Belcher as he comes forward, pick away at him, and then shoot for takedowns and keep him on the fence and on the ground for long durations of time. So my prediction in this fight is Yushin Okami to defeat Alan Belcher by decision. Our third and final middleweight main card matchup pits Tim the Barbarian Boetsch 16-4-0 against 11-2-0 with 1 no contest Costa. Philippou is filling in for his teammate Chris Weidman in this matchup. Now looking at Boetsch, the guy's on a significant run since dropping to middleweight. He's undefeated at 4-0, defeating Kendall Grove, Nick Ring, stopping Yushin Okami, and a controversial split decision victory for Hector Lombard. Philippou, on the other hand, he's also won 4 in a row. George Rivera, Jared Hammond, Court McGee, and finally Ricky Fukuda in his last appearance. Now, very interesting matchup here. Now, Costa Philippou, it's not really late. It's technically he's filling in for an injury, but he's had quite a bit of time to get ready for this fight. And one thing to look at here, even though he's filling in on late notice, if you will, he works with Chris Weidman. They come out of the same Serra Longo training camp. So, yes, it's a different fighter and waiting to get ready, but the camp he's working in, very familiar and has been game planning for Tim Boetsch, and they'll at least have knowledge of what Tim Boetsch brings to the cage and how to prepare Philippou best. Now looking at Boetsch first, traditionally the guy has trouble with power wrestlers, that's all his losses have come against guys like Phil Davis. And quickly off the top of my head, Phil Davis, Jason Brills, Matt Hamill, Vladimir Matyashenko, these strong grapplers, which isn't Costa's game. He does have talent. He is decent guy on the ground, but that's not his forte. Boetsch is a very physically strong individual, NCAA Division I wrestler, 7 wins by knockout. He effectively uses his kicks. I like that push kick. He'll throw a lot of kicks, and he does. He can do a lot of damage with those strikes. Against Yushin Okami, he has a powerful right, and he was landing it with regularity in that fight. But at the same time, he was getting eaten up by Okami's combinations and hurt, and that's something Philippou does very effectively. In the Hector Lombard fight, he did just enough to win that fight, but he went 0 for 9 in takedown attempts, and Lombard did an excellent job defending those matchups. Against Costa here, he's going to need to use his wrestling, and he's going to need to use those kicks to keep Costa out of range with his boxing. Now looking at Boetsch's takedown percentage, 38%, which is not impressive. 0-9 versus Lombard. He did go 4 for 6 against Nick Ring, but it wasn't until Nick Ring really tired and wore down in the second half of that fight where he started having success. 7 for 14 against Kendall Grove. Going back to the Ring fight, he had a nice hip toss and was very effectively able to put Ring on his backside when he got a hold of him. Now, conditioning could be an issue. He's looked so good so far at middleweight, but in a grueling matchup, that could really play a role. Now, in the Okami fight, he was getting handled for the first 2 rounds. There's no denying that. And he went for broke, and he showed his power and was able to put him away with those beautiful uppercuts along the cage. And that's something, he's got a lot of physical strength. Now, Costa Philippou has developed some of the best takedown defense in the UFC. He dropped his debut against Nick Catone on the basis of takedowns, but since then, 85% takedown defense, is effectively able to get on the cage, use those underhooks, and establish his upper body strength to push his opponents off. Fukuda went 0 for 8, Court McGee 0 for 8, Catone went 3 for 8 in his attempts, so certainly capable of shutting the takedowns down. He has excellent boxing skills, limited kicks, which is a big advantage for Boetsch. We saw him stop Jared Ham with those beautiful shots down the middle. He does slow down a little bit late as well, but Tim Boetsch isn't the type of guy who's going to be able to break him late with the conditioning, because Boetsch's conditioning isn't there either. Tim Boetsch had a little bit of trouble with the footwork and movement of Nick Ring in that fight, and he really didn't start to have success until Ring slowed down. And Costa has excellent footwork as well, and should be able to navigate around the cage. This is a horsepower versus horsepower matchup, and I really like the combinations of Costa Philippou and the footwork and the takedown defense to play a role. So my prediction is Costa Philippou to defeat Tim Boetsch by decision. In our co-main event of the evening, we head to the UFC's lightweight division as Jim Miller, 21-4-0, battles J-Lo Lauzon, 22-7-0. Lauzon is coming off a submission victory over Jamie Varner via triangle choke, which was an excellent fight. You have to check that out if you haven't seen it already. Jim Miller, on the other hand, is coming off a submission defeat against Nate Diaz and is actually filling in for Gray Maynard in this matchup after Maynard went down with an injury. Looking at Jim Miller first, he has a wrestling background. He's a BJJ black belt, 12 wins by submission. Now, he is coming off the first time he's ever been finished in his career, so that should play a motivating factor in Miller's efforts in this fight. Looking at the 4 men that have beat Jim Miller, they are the top guys in the division, all tied to the title. Of course, the current champion, Benson Henderson, the former champion, Frankie Edgar, and the other 2 men to challenge the title recently, Nate Diaz and Gray Maynard. Those are the 4 guys that beat Jim Miller. Now, Joe Lauzon, 18 wins by submission. Very impressive. He has been submitted 3 times in his career, and 6 of his 7 career losses have come by finish, so certainly something to keep in mind there. Now, looking at Lauzon first, he has decent striking, straight hands. He has good power. He dropped Melvin Guillard in that matchup. He also hurt Jamie Varner several times in their fight. Now, Lauzon has conditioning issues. A lot of people call him one-round Joe or whatever you want to say there. But he seems to be fighting, especially in the Varner fight, smarter, much more mature in his most recent appearances. When he fought George Soteropoulos, he fought the opening round at a very frenetic pace and had a lot of success, but he slowed down in round 2 and eventually was submitted. Same thing with Sam Stout. He attacked early against Stout, couldn't finish it, and faded and lost that matchup. Now, Lauzon showed an excellent sprawl in Soteropoulos' fight. He's got 60% takedown defense, which is awesome if he wants to keep the fight standing. But on the ground, he is incredibly dangerous, both top and bottom, very aggressive. We saw what he did against Gabe Rudiger, aggressively attacking Rudiger and shutting him down. As I said, he's awesome off his back. He sweeps, excellent sweeps. He swept Jamie Varner and eventually transitioned to the triangle to finish that fight, which is all very impressive. Now on the feet, he was covering up very well against Varner's big shots, but Varner was having a lot of success with his body shots and was hurting him with his right hand, which is something to keep in mind here. Now, Lauzon has a tendency to absorb a lot of strikes, getting hit 3.81 times per minute, compared to Miller, who only gets hit just over 2 strikes per minute, which is, again, a big differential. Now, in the Lauzon-Varner fight, Lauzon did his best in that matchup in the second half. It was an entertaining bout, but when Varner started to get tired from taking that fight on short notice, that's when Lauzon took over. And that's something to keep in mind as well. Now, Miller, looking at Jim Miller out, he's a very aggressive grappler. He constantly attacks submissions, was constantly was going after Ben Henderson for submissions, even to his own detriment, which put him in some tough situations. He's got power in his hands, even though he doesn't have big knockout numbers. He hurt Gleison Tebow a couple of times in their matchup a couple of years back. Looking when he fought Melvin Guillard, he got hurt by Guillard a couple of times, but just kept moving forward and eventually was able to jump on his back and lock in the rear naked choke. Jim Miller's a very tough guy. Now, against Nate Diaz, he did have his issues, but I'll talk about that in a second. He had a lot of movement. He used a lot of movement with the striking. He has very good leg kicks, but he had a little trouble with Nate Diaz's reach, and that's something that showed up in that fight significantly, but there will be no reach advantage in this fight against Lauzon. Miller sometimes will get too aggressive, a little bit wild with his hands, going after his opponent too much. He was rocked by the straight left of Diaz, and the simple volume of Nate's attack was breaking Jim down and discouraging him. What I expect in this fight is Miller should be able to replicate the success that Jamie Varner had early in round 1 of that matchup against Joe Lauzon, but he'll be able to do it over 3 rounds or however long this matchup goes, I don't expect Miller to fade. I actually expect Miller to push a pace that's going and outwork Lauzon to the point where Lauzon starts to fade and break down a little bit. I'm going to take Jim Miller to win this fight by submission. Maybe he hurts him and drops him and submits him. So again, my official prediction, Jim Miller to defeat Joe Lauzon by submission. In the main event of the evening, the UFC's heavyweight champion, Junior Cigano dos Santos, 15-1-0, defends his title against the man he took it from, Cain Velasquez, 10-1-0. Dos Santos is on a ridiculous winning streak at this point in time, and he's coming off a UFC 146 TKO victory with former champion Frank Mir. Cain Velasquez, on the other hand, also UFC 146, defeated Antonio Silva via TKO. Now, going back to the first fight, video evidence has come out that Cain Velasquez was injured, hurt, I believe it was his ACL going into that fight, which is a significant injury, and, you know, again, for a guy that's so wrestling-based like Velasquez is. And it was, you know, whether it was true, partially true, not true at all, whatever, Cain didn't look himself in that first fight. I took actually Velasquez to win that matchup, but he did not look himself. He was moving forward, but not nearly as aggressively or with as much confidence as he normally does. He was throwing some leg kicks early and looking to take away the movement of Junior Dos Santos, but one thing you had to watch is Junior Dos Santos was countering with a beautiful straight right, and it never landed off the leg kick counter, but he was doing it, and that's something to keep in mind for Cain, because they really focused on Cain's use of leg kicks as being a big weapon. But if Junior can figure out how to counter that, that takes that away. Now, he briefly, there was no real takedown attempts by Velasquez. He briefly caught his leg, but really couldn't hold on and wasn't able to muster up much of a wrestling attack as he had wanted to. He did put a solid left hook on Junior's chin. Really had seemed to have no effect on the Brazilian, which is something to keep in mind. Now, it was a big overhand right for Junior that caught and KO'd Cain, caught him behind the ear and dropped him down. Now, Junior, 11 of his 15 wins have come by knockout. He does have 2 subs in his career and just awarded his black belt, so he certainly could, you know, is a well-trained fighter in all diversities. Now, looking at his takedown defense, 88%, unbelievable. But it will be tested. Cain's takedown percentage, completion percentage, 71%, so big numbers there. Junior has been taken down he was taken down once by Shane Carwin and once by by Gabriel Gonzaga, and those 2 takedown attempts led to a grand total of 13 seconds on his back. Taking him down is hard, apparently keeping him down even harder. Junior has a brutal uppercut, great right hand, and he effectively jabs and throws hooks to the body, and he does that, and he was doing it effectively against Frank Mir to set up the big shots, as, you know, when the opponent starts dropping his hands to protect against the body shots, it leaves openings to go upstairs with his big power punching. He has good counter shots, and he's primarily boxing-based with his attack. He doesn't throw a lot of kicks. He can, but he chooses not to. Some big statistics to throw at you. He lands 6.87 strikes per minute compared to only getting hit 2.09. So over a long fight, those are big-time numbers to take into consideration. Now, against Frank Mir, he looked for the takedown and simply couldn't get it. And now he was doing the same thing against Junior, trying to work the leg kicks like Cain did. And that's, you know, it wasn't overly effective. He was landing some nice kicks, but they weren't really having that big of an effect. Now, as Frank Mir came in, Junior was able to hit him and time him, and he slipped some power shots through Frank Mir's guard. And even when Mir partially blocked some of the shots with his guard, they still were doing damage, and he was able to hurt him at the end of the first round with a big right hand, and the bell essentially kept that fight going. Again, he flurried and hurt Mir along the cage with just brutal hooks and accurate shots on the chin. He made use of all the punches he threw. Now, again, in the second round, he landed a beautiful right hook off of a Mir kick. Mir left his chin open, and that eventually put him away. Now, looking at Cain, in his fight against Bigfoot Silva, he was able to smash him. He got the score with the takedown early, cut him open, and flurried, and the referee had no choice but to stop that fight. He looked good, but it was a very brief performance. He's motivated, but again, that fight hinged on his ability to take the fight to the ground. Going back to Cain Velasquez's fight with Czech Congo, he was hit multiple times and hurt multiple times, and he needed to rely on the takedowns to get the fight to the ground, to get it over a position of danger, and that's something that weighs on your mind heavily when you're looking at this matchup. Cain needs to use his wrestling, his cardio, and his leg kicks effectively in this matchup if he's going to win his title back. But getting takedowns against Junior is so difficult, and as I already said, the leg kicks leave him vulnerable to that overhand right counter that Junior seems to worked against Mir, and he was attempting against Cain Velasquez. So 2 of those 3 things are big issues, and I don't know how much of a cardio edge. Cain has cardio for days, but I don't really see Junior being the type of guy who's going to slow down. If Cain can't get the takedowns, it's going to lead to a kickboxing fight, which is something you do not want to be in against Junior Dos Santos. Velasquez lands 7.09 strikes per minute, which is a big number, but a lot of that is ground-based. And again, I keep saying this, if he can't get the fight to the ground, he's still capable on the feet. We saw him knock out Nogueira with his hands, but he's not the same fighter. Junior Dos Santos is saying if this fight goes to the mat, he wants the sub with his new black belt. I don't think so. I see too many openings here, so my prediction is Junior Dos Santos to defeat Cain Velasquez by TKO. So those are my main card predictions and one preliminary prediction for UFC 155. I'm a little bit under the weather, guys, so I apologize if I was a little bit harder to listen to this time around. All of my prelim predictions will be available over at KamikazeOverdrive.net, along with the panel's predictions for this event. They'll be breaking all the fights down. And, of course, you can buy the bet packs. You can check out all that information. The prizes are up for grabs. As I said before, buy the bet pack. This time, if it's not a good show, you'll get the next bet pack for absolutely free. 2012 has been a pretty good year. KamikazeOverdrive.net got launched at the beginning of the year. Hasn't been quite on the web for an entire calendar year yet, but that's coming soon. But thank you very much, as always, for listening. I always enjoy doing this, guys. And I hope to hear from you, some of your positive comments, negative comments. Either way, it's always enjoyable. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in 2013.